Greetings, YouTube misfits, miscreants, malcontents, and misanthropes. Claire here, and this is my new introduction to part 1 of Geology and NephilimFree, a series that looks at some of NephilimFree's balmier comments concerning geology. I've added this new introduction, I've added some new annotations, and a whole new ending. So I hope you enjoy it. Take it away, Nephi.
I want to show you something really funny. Check this out. You're going to like this. The deposition rate for sediment on the ocean floors out of the open oceans is 2 to 3 centimeters per 1,000 years. Now, 1 centimeter is equal to 0.09843 feet. It takes 6,000 years at that rate to build not quite 6 inches of sediment, and 11,000 years to build 1 foot of sediment on the ocean floors.
Sparky, I don't know where you got that number. It may be the average, but there are enormous numbers of sedimentary environments that vary hugely in terms of average sedimentation rate in the world's oceans. I mean, sedimentation in the deep ocean has nothing to do with, say, sedimentation at the mouth of a great river like the Amazon or the Nile or the Mississippi, and that has little to do with sedimentation rates in peaceful back bay environments or estuaries. So the number is entirely irrelevant.
Here's the funny thing, though, I wanted to point out. Evolutionists actually have to believe, because they deny the flood, that all the sea creature fossils we find on the ocean floors, the fish, the crustaceans, and whatnot, they died, they lay there on the ocean floor for thousands of years until they were slowly buried by sediment and then mineralized.
Wow, you really don't know the first thing about any of this, do you? You have no idea how often I hear this from creationists who don't know the first thing about sedimentologic processes, or taphonomy for that matter. I'm not even going to define that word for you. Look it up. You have a computer. Taphonomy. I'll spell it for you. But the thing is, your entire comment is based on a misconception about uniformitarianism. It doesn't say everything happens slowly. It says natural processes operating today operated the same way in the past. And some processes, sure, are real slow, but lots of other processes aren't that slow, including, in many environments, sedimentation. Now, the thing you said about the decay of organisms once they die and they settle to the bottom, that's largely a matter of chemistry. There are environments that impede decay. For instance, environments that are oxygen poor or entirely lacking in oxygen, because if there's no oxygen, there's probably no bacteria to break down the organism. Also, if there's no oxygen, there are probably no scavengers to rip apart the organism. So it can lay there for a while. I'm not talking millions. I'm not even talking years. I'm talking, months maybe. And that's particularly true if there are no strong currents, if it's a very peaceful, quiet environment. It's all a matter of the chemistry, Nav, and you obviously don't know about that or how water chemistry varies from environment to environment. Maybe you should have spent a couple of years reading about that instead of memorizing creationist websites. And then you recently squeezed out this little doggy nugget.
Did you know that there are coal deposits on the ocean floors? That's right.
Coal on the bottom of the ocean. That's fascinating, hon. Mind giving us a reference? Because you see, I think I'm fairly knowledgeable, and I don't know of any vast coal deposits on the bottom of the ocean.
Coal is massive amounts of creatures and plant life, mostly plants, that have been rapidly gathered and buried by water. Gathered into one place, pooled into one mass, and buried. Has to be buried rapidly.
And leaf litter and woody materials are buried rapidly in something called swamps, Nephi. And incidentally, swamps are precisely the kind of deoxygenated environment I described earlier that inhibits the decay and destruction of organic material. Now, changing the subject entirely, I seem to recall a video in which you referred to some giant ripple marks in Nebraska and referred to a Google Earth image. I assume you were talking about the Nebraska Sandhills region. Here is a Google image of part of it. And maybe you should just study this sort of thing more before you talk about it, hon. Because things like this aren't that unusual in the world. As a matter of fact, giant ripples are found in a number of places in a particular kind of environment. Like, for instance, here, it's just that they're not called ripples. They're more appropriately called dunes, sweet cheeks. And the Sandhills region is a vast dune field that has been stabilized by vegetation. Now, in closing, I want to show you an image. And I'd like you to explain to me how the sedimentary rock layers shown in the image were formed in one giant single flood event.
Shucks, folks, I'm speechless.
Now, after I made that video, I gave that particular question some thought, and I realized I didn't give you enough information because, well, I understand you're kind of thick. So let me explain more fully what I'm asking. In that picture, the rocks in the lower part of the picture are shales, and they're turned up at an extreme angle. Now, presumably, as sediments, they were laid down in more or less horizontal beds, like thus. On top of the beds that are at an extreme angle, there's some sandstone sitting on top at a completely different angle. In other words, they're horizontal. My question is, how does one flood event deposit the shales, deform them up, push them up so that they're standing almost on end, while simultaneously the sandstones, completely undeformed, are deposited horizontally on top? And by the way, the point of contact between the shales and the sandstones is an erosional surface. Now, it seems to me that if you want to go with the flood story as an explanation for deposition of the shales and sandstones, you might want to consider multiple events. Here's a scenario that kind of works. First, the flood started.
The weather started getting rough, the tiny ship was tossed.
Then it stops for a while as the ages roll and the shales are folded up into mountains and eroded. And then the ultimate frog strangler starts again.
I'm too smart for Exodus 2.
Well, he's just an excitable boy.